I was really fortunate, for a million and one reasons. I ended up in Mexico, and I had just come from Los Angeles. And at that time, bands like Guns N' Roses and Motley Crue were exploding. So you had that Motley Crue, more hair band style at that time. And then you had Guns N' Roses. It was much more street level looking, cultural wise, just the more biker looking, so to speak. And I was in the middle of that because at that time as well, the Anne Rice books, Interview with the Vampire and all that stuff came out. And they were reissued and they caught on with the Hollywood crowd. This was late 80s, I think, mid to late 80s. And I was right in the middle of all of that. And, the Lost Boys and all that kind of stuff. And there was a band, but it was kind of like a brotherhood. It was, Hollywood Vampires. And, now it's more of a band, right? With Alice Cooper, I guess, and Johnny Depp and Joe Perry and I forget who else. But we all kind of had the logo on our jackets or whatever. So when I got to Los Angeles, I went to Mexico. And when I was kind of being discovered, I was kind of in the parking lot of the Arena Mexico. And I thought it was like a gymnasium. I wanted to go shower and work out. I had no idea that it was actually the Arena Mexico and what it stood for. So when I was talking to them in the parking lot, I had long purple hair and the tattoos and all that kind of stuff. And I was super, super white and skinny and tall, like a vampire, that kind of thing. And when he said, "Where are you from?" And I Canada. And what is it? Why do you like vampires so much? Because you saw the back of my jacket. And I told him, and then he said, "You're the Canadian vampire." And that's how that kind of happened. And the wrestling community took it as a joke. And it was treated as a joke. It was like that because it had nothing to do with wrestling. I had no clue. And by 3 or 4 matches, the culture instantly changed because the government didn't let bands like foreign bands like Metallica or U2, you couldn't go to you just couldn't. And the television was really censored and controlled. So MTV wasn't allowed on the air. When things started to change, they let MTV on the air, and then all of a sudden they let American bands or foreign bands come to Mexico. So there was a explosion of culture, and at the same time they needed content on TV. So pro wrestling was a phenomenon. When I got there, I was the first one with the rock and roll look. I had nothing to do with everybody else, and within 2 to 3 weeks, the arena went from about 2% women to 90% women. It was more like a boy band thing. It was nothing to do with sports. But I followed a philosophy they gave me that said the moment you learn to wrestle, your career is over. Because if you have women screaming, and it was you can find it. I don't want to say it, but it was something else. It was real rock stars. So when all that happened, they gave me a videotape of a very famous Mexican actor who had, in the golden age of cinema, was the biggest star in the history of cinema for Latinos. He perished in a plane crash and all that, kind of like James Dean. Now he's like that urban legend down there. And the idea for me to watch one of his movies was he suffers, he sells, he suffers, always bad luck. And at the end, he sings and gets the girl and go away. And they said, you have to suffer just so. And at the end, even you're never going to win. You win by disqualification or something like that. Because the people are wanting you to be this hero for them because you look like them and the girls are mental for you. So that lasted 40 years because when I came in, the fathers and mothers who had, they became their children and children. So I have like 4 generations of knowing the culture and living with the people. But so now if I wrestled in Mexico, it's the fans that were there in the 90s come with their kids and stuff. And it's become something that I have no idea. I never knew what the hell it meant, but it's even worse now. But back then, it was so insane. It was, and like usually things go like 6 or 7 months like that. This went at least 9 years. It was like, wow. And that was kind of, all of that was kind of like that, wrestling 6 times a day, 6 days a week. And on the 7th day, wrestling 10 times. There was that much work in Mexico, and the character was in that much demand. So it was once in a life. I don't see that ever happening again or at least not in my lifetime in any territory, because the territories aren't hot anymore because of the internet. So I had a hell of a life. It was awesome. Sorry for the long answer, but it's a big history.
It's all good. What are some of your favorite feuds from your time in Mexico?
I never had a favorite feud. I never really had feuds. I had a couple of opponents that there was a little bit of history from because of the heat we had on TV. But I was very fortunate. It didn't matter they actually wouldn't take the stars of the company. They didn't need it. Vampiro drew so many people, you can put him against the local heel. So it wasn't really, Mexico's different. They don't really care about the feuds. They care, if you're hot with the public, that draws. It's a different philosophy. So I kind of lived it that way.
All right. You also went to Japan in the mid-90s. How did you adjust to the style over there?
I was such a fan. I studied Japanese wrestling videotapes at least 2 hours a day, every single day. I'm the great Muda. I'm a mark for him, and I emulated him. I idolized him. I loved the Japanese. It's just, to me, it was so awesome. I didn't, I was never a fan of WWE, for example, but All Japan and New Japan, just that warrior martial arts attitude. That's my thing. The kicks, the high kicks, the hard shots. I absolutely adored that. So I prepared just by studying and studying and studying. Yeah. I fucked up the first time. I looked like an idiot, but at least I went.
What do you think led to that that love of that warrior style?
Because one of the only memories I have with my dad is going to see Bruce Lee when the Bruce Lee movies came out in the early 70s. And I mean, when you're a kid and you see Bruce Lee, and because there's nothing, there's only 2 TV channels. There's no, so it's either comic books or what? And then all of a sudden the Bruce Lee on screen with the punches, the kicks, the screaming, the body, is like, what the fuck? So that kind of was born from that. Like I was like, 3 or 4 years old, and it's been in my liking ever since. And then, I got into martial arts, and because of that style of fighting, and it's kind of like the American wrestling. If I had, it doesn't do it for me. I like American indie wrestling, but I don't like the organizations at all. They probably don't like me. I'm not being offensive, but I'm just trying to say my personal liking was the seriousness of Japan.
How did you end up in WCW? I mean,
with paying for my sins. I was burning out in Mexico, and it was time for an evolution in life, because Mexico was coming to an end. And once you get used to a certain style of life, mentally it's almost like an addiction. So I was burning out in Mexico. There was really nowhere that I wanted to be, and nobody really wanted to be with me anymore, because we did it for 9-10 years. And I was very fortunate. Norman Smiley got me an audition for WCW in Universal Studios, and it was on a Sunday afternoon, and I met Terry Taylor, and Terry Taylor to me is like a father. I absolutely respect and love Terry Taylor, and he said, "Hey kid, we need you to do the job," and all that kind of stuff. And I worked with Eddie Guerrero, I keep hearing that Eddie Guerrero didn't really like me, and he wrote things in his book. But Eddie and I kind of grew up together before the fame stuff, and I don't see what he saw. I love Eddie, and if Eddie was offended by anything I've done, Eddie, I'm sorry. But that was that. I couldn't stand the American style of wrestling. I just wasn't for me, I guess.
What made you choose WCW over going to possibly WWF at that time?
When I got the match with Eddie, and I mean, we beat the out of each other. And they said, hey, Eric Bischoff wants you to come to Nitro the next day. And I had the match with Brad Armstrong, and that match got me my contract. That night, and because I did some martial arts stuff, and Eric's a big martial arts guy, and I was a taller, bigger guy, and there's not a lot of people who were moving like that at the time, my size. And they offered me a deal right, like literally coming out of the ring. They were waiting. J.J. Dillon was there, and he says, hey. And I said no. And they said, let us sweeten the deal. And it was like, there's absolutely no way at that stage in life that I could say no to that. So I said, yes, of course. And they said, okay, come to the office tomorrow. Because this was, because they flew us back to Atlanta. And at that night at dinner, Johnny Ace came in. And Johnny Ace, John Laurinaitis, who's also a friend of mine, was working in All Japan. And he was the guy bringing people to All Japan and bringing people to the WWF. And he said, listen, whatever they're offering you, we can better it. And I, out of loyalty and correct ethics, I had already verbally committed. And being old school taught, you don't disrespect and jump just for a few more dollars. So it was kind of one of those things.
So did it bother you when the Brood, Gangrel, Edge, and Christian, debuted right in WWF right after you signed to WCW? Do you think those characters were done to counteract what you were bringing?
100%. But no, I thought it was awesome. I loved, I'm a horror freak, and I love that kind of stuff, and their entrance, and there was 3 of them, and the name and the Brood and all that. I thought it was, I loved it. I really did. I didn't watch a lot of it. I was aware of it, and I thought it was just the coolest thing. Is it known that because of me that was there? No. Is it no? But I've been told by the correct people that was kind of the competition of, not that they or I were our competition. The scenario. So, and I met everybody, and we're all cool, man. We're all friends, so it's awesome.
All right. The NWO was still huge around this time. What were your interactions like with Scott Hall and Kevin Nash?
They were pretty non-existent, and they weren't good. The little bit that there was, because there were certain other people politicking, and I wasn't even aware of it. But to block, wrestling is evil, and we basically didn't have any. And then over time, once. Sorry, this is kicking my ass. Once they saw that the people politicking against me were in the wrong, things started to shift. But we became friends after WCW.
Talk about your time working with Sting in WCW. What was the initial plan for you guys, and what was it like the first time you met?
First time we met, he wasn't very nice to me. He didn't want to say hello. And there was a lot of problems with the face paint. But I mean, I've been painting my face since, I don't know, 89 probably, you know what I mean? So it's like, I didn't understand. So to me, it didn't make a difference, or it didn't bother me. The characters, I have the idea that if you look a certain way, that doesn't mean anything. It's what your intentions of, right? But then after a while, the idea was, to make us partners, and I turned on him, and then we would have a feud. I've heard him say, or I've been told that he wasn't in favor of it. I absolutely love Sting. He taught me so much. Oh my God, it was a complete blessing. And last year, 2 years ago, we met at an expo, and we shook hands, and we talked about the Bible. It was incredible, and it's not like we had to bury the hatchet, but it was just, this is okay. So it was good, man. Yeah, I got nothing but good things to say.
All right. That was around the time that I think Sting converted or got saved.
You became a transformer? What are you oh, I'm sorry. I didn't know that, man.
Yeah. So, and I think it was around that time
Yeah,
you were coming in.
Yeah.
Do you think maybe he knew what your character was like, and maybe he was apprehensive?
Everybody was. I mean, in Italy, we got a letter from the Vatican for me to tone it down, because I do practice ritual magic. I live in the paranormal world, my podcast, my TV stuff. To me, it's a lifestyle. I ain't playing, like I'm in it. So, even because of WCW, some of the older guys were like, Marilyn Manson was, and this was in Florida, a lot of our work. So there was that whole devil worship thing, like for shoot. And it was like, well, hi. And, involved with ICP, being involved with the Misfits, everything horror oriented. It was intense, because a lot of guys were standoffish, and TV got warnings all the time. So I thought it was awesome. I thought we clicked. I watch it back now on YouTube, and it's still, it looks like it could have happened yesterday. We looked good together. We sold good for each other. It was exciting. It was like a hockey fight, because, I'm a big Detroit Red Wings fan, and Bob Probert, when he used to get in hockey fights, rest in peace, Bob, his equipment would be all over the place. It was a mess. And Sting would have his clothes on, and I would have mine, and it turned into that. It was just, to me, it was exciting. I loved it. I loved the chemistry. I guess more student teacher. I was so enthralled.
What do you remember about the Human Torch match? WWE just released it on their YouTube channel.
Oh, did they?
Yeah, and a lot of new fans are seeing it for the first time. What do you remember about it?
I was scared to f***ing death of heights. And that f***ing Sting knew that. So when we were climbing up it, I thought we were going to have, it was hot. It was an awesome match, Because I forget what movie I took that from, about the gas on everybody. There was a movie, and I came up with that idea. But it was so intensely scary. The guy would walk into a subway station with a spray can and spray the person in the booth for the money and light them on fire. So I got it from that. And they were like, "You're insane." And it was awesome because it was working. So I thought we were going to have like this 20, 30-minute hardcore match. And it was like 4 minutes long. I didn't know how to take that at the time. I was like, is that an American thing? Because I didn't understand the culture yet. Like, I didn't have the experience. No one really said anything. I just went off of what I knew. So I didn't understand it, but it was pretty impressive, meaning it still exists in the minds of a lot of people today. So when we were climbing up, because Sting called it, he says, "Let's go." Okay. And when we started walking up there, he kept trying to push me off, the mother, and I was having a heart attack. I thought I was gonna die. I swear to God, because I got a fear of heights. And he thought it was funny and was trying to, he did, that bastard. But I just remember I made them put a big, I don't know how to say it in English, forklift, big, like a big forklift right behind the curtain, so that they could bring me right down. I was so fucking petrified. But I think I just know it was cool. So those are my memories, Sting.
You and Konnan had a very long history before WCW.
Yeah.
What issues did you guys have from back in the day that may have spilled over into WCW?
Well, it was all of that. Yeah, that's what I was telling you with Kevin Nash, man. It was Carlos trying to block me. I think, pro wrestling is not the safest place to be if you have mental health issues, 99% of us do. That's why we're here. And that's why we portray a character, and it's somehow getting the violence or the hate out of you, all that bullshit that they love pro wrestling. No, you're a mental case. That's why you're here. Just accept it. It's okay. And we were two young guys. I have my own mental health issues, and he definitely has his. And they're very different things because, it's an individual thing. So, we were two young guys, and the popularity of wrestling in Mexico at the time, it wasn't sold out. We were rock stars. We were on a level that we needed private security. And Carlos and Konnan and I were like the competing. So everybody who was like trying to provoke us to fight and say things just to get us to go at each other and cause a scandal, because they're really morbid people, and wrestling's evil. But since then we've come to terms, and I call him a friend, and if he ever needed me, I'd be right there.
You were one of very, very few names to have a pinfall win against Hulk Hogan. Talk us through how that whole deal transpired.
Everybody says Hulk Hogan is not professional, all that kind of stuff. Well, look what he did for me. And I think we started because when I was 14 years old, and I met Hulk Hogan backstage because I was beginning to work for a wrestling company in Canada, a ring boy and sweeping the floor and all that. And when I shook his hand, that was Hulk Hogan. This big I've never seen a human being that size before. And his hand was like putting on a extra, extra, extra large baseball glove. And when he came out in the public, at that time, if you saw that live, and that was Kiss, that was Motley Crue, he was like, that's fucking Hulk Hogan. So when I knew I was going to wrestle him, I told him that story. And all of his friends in Canada were the people I worked for. So we started to click. Plus, he's a bass player and I am a bass player. So we started talking about bass guitars and stuff. And he just kind of understood that, there's a little bit more to talk about than wrestling. And when we got in the ring and we got to the night, they told me, said, like, Hulk says you go up. I was like, what? And I went back and I said, listen, I can't. I can't. That's Mr. Hulk Hogan. I can't. And they said, no, Hulk wants it. And I didn't know how to go up to him and say anything other than, I don't know what to say to you. I don't think thank you covers it. So that's my memories of that. That was awesome, man. Wow.
Why do you think he gave you the rub like that?
Because I have blue eyes. I don't know, dude. I think it was just a connection with music, actually. It was his idea. Hulk Hogan had complete creative control. So he says, what he says is what it is. It was him.
All right. What were the plans with you and Hulk beyond that? Were there any plans beyond that?
No, not really. I got to wrestle Ric Flair. I was one of the first new generation guys to go with the heavyweights and not just be a job boy. Like I worked with Luger and Sting, and I worked with the Steiners. I worked with, Henning. I worked with Flair and Hogan, and I was in competitive storylines with them. So I just think it was good to have a new heavyweight, a bigger guy who can hang, and was so different. Fit Finlay, I got to work with Fit. So I don't understand it, but that was something that I think that they were giving me the opportunity to earn my place.
All right, you like you said, you also ended up wrestling Ric Flair. What were those matches like?
I was so waiting for it, because when I got there's one of the things, who cares about this, but here's a little thing. I never in my life have showered in the building. Never. Because of the Bruiser Broda story. And I was like, I was petrified. So I just came back from Puerto Rico and I was like, and Puerto Rico was Abdullah the Butcher, Bruiser Brody, Carlos Colon, Ric Flair. Like when the territory days, when people needed to stay out of the limelight, they would come to Puerto Rico. And if you see the videotapes from those times, like there's 40,000 people in a baseball stadium, out of their fucking minds. As you watch Abdullah the Butcher and Bruiser Brody, and it's like that's what I want to do with my life. I don't, it's not about the technical thing. It's like instilling that belief in the people. And Ric Flair was a monstrous part of that. So just I never looked at, oh my God, it's Ric Flair. I was like, oh no, I know where he comes from. And I want to absorb that. So that's how I looked at it. And he said and everybody was like, don't say shit. And I said, Mr. Flair, what do you want to do? He says, lock up with me. We locked up. He said, we'll have a match. And that was it. Never talked to him again until after. But he called everything in the ring. Every fucking thing. It was, I was so out of my league. I was just marking out. It was awesome. It was awesome. Yeah. Oh man. I haven't thought about this stuff in ever, man.
Nice. You had a couple cool deals with Scott Steiner too. Different styles, but it worked. What do you remember about wrestling?
I think they liked it because it was a fight. Because Scott liked to fight, and I worked well fighting. He was super cool with me. He was so friendly. He was light as a feather. He was very supportive. He was open to everything. It was a lesson to me in humility. He's got a lot of heat everywhere. I'm assuming. I've heard. I don't really give a shit about wrestling gossip, but he's never once not said hi to me. We had that feud, and I was like, when I was starting to get into wrestling, they had the UWF, and I remember they had the it was on Sunday mornings, and they would show the Steiner brothers would do the training at the school, the Steiner brothers, and you would see the Steiner brothers, and you see them do it in the Frankenstein and all that kind of stuff, and the German suplexes. You're like, oh my God, those guys are superheroes. So there's a lot of history there. It was really cool. Yeah.
How did y'all get along behind the scenes?
Awesome. Because, because I don't think anybody wanted to listen to him anymore talking about how much he hated Ric Flair. So I think I was a new ear to spew love for Mr. Flair. And we would kind of travel around the same areas, and we would go to the same gym and stuff like that. So it was, we weren't, we weren't going to go to the movies together, but we were definitely friendly. Yeah, it was cool. He was awesome, honestly. Still is.
Another match I wanted to ask about is you versus Dr. Death, Steve Williams at Starrcade.
Okay.
What can you tell me about that match? What do you remember?
That match saved my life with Steve Williams. Because when we first met, I was like, Steve, you're an inspiration to me, and I watch all your All Japan stuff. What is it you would like me to do for you? When I spoke to him like that, he kind of adopted me as little brother. He loved it, and I loved it because I was a fan of that Japanese style. And, I said, let's have an All Japan match. And he was like, kid, you sure? And I was like, don't kill me, but yes, I'm sure. I would love to. I know how. I can't do this shit, but I can do that. And we had that style of a match, and it was so good. What an experience. But with him, when I was in Japan, in the Budokan, big 18,000 seat sumo thing, and you hear that music, and he's coming down the ramp in Japan against you. Oh, me. That was fear. Yes, sir. Yeah.
What do you think would have been scarier? You've lived at Steve Williams' entrance, or maybe say the Undertaker, the bell gong. Which would?
Oh, Steve Williams. because I'm into vampires and horror. I want to do the Undertaker's intro. I love it, man. But when you hear Steve Williams grunting and fucking snot coming out of his fucking nose, and he's just, it's like, what am I supposed to do? It's like, please just get it over quick.
How did the Deadpool faction with you and ICP and Raven come about?
They were like, because of the rock and roll thing, and ICP was coming in. They were like, I'm painting the face and all that kind of stuff. They were like, let's put these guys together and see what happens. And Raven was the outcast, and the leader of the outcast type thing, right? So when Raven came in, Raven was a real big fan of the Deadpool comic. So Raven came up with that idea. That was 100% Raven. And it was a great idea. But we didn't last for more than 2 weeks. You know what I mean? So I don't even remember what happened there. But with ICP, we clicked in the biggest of ways, for sure. We became very, very close friends.
Were you aware of ICP before they came?
Yeah, because one of my heroes, Steve Jones, who's the guitar player from the Sex Pistols, played on an ICP record. And I was reading an interview with Steve Jones, and he had mentioned ICP, and they explained who and what ICP is. And then like 3 days later, I went to television and they told me ICP. So it was kind of a cool moment. And that's kind of how that happened.
All right. What do you remember about your graveyard match against the Demon?
Was there a match? Wasn't it in a swamp or some bullshit like that?
So, yeah.
The graveyard was the Sting, isn't it?
Let's see. The match was earlier in the night before the Jarrett, Hogan, and Russo situation happened.
It was pretty brief, right?
I believe so.
Yeah, you know what? I've completely forgot about that. But it's, I got all these head injuries, so I got some serious memory issues, PTSD and all that. But I remember in the swamp with him. That was horrifying when we fell into the swamp. I had to go underwater in the dark in the swamp. I'm like, there's snakes and crocodiles and sharks and all kind of shit down here. And you sure you want to do a vignette like this? And it was like, I have PTSD because of that. It was scary. It was fucking scary, dude. So I think I blocked that though out of my mind. So thank you very much for bringing that up, you motherfucker.
What do you think the main reasons were that WCW collapsed in just 3 years after you got there?
I mean, I kind of sucked, but it wasn't that bad, was it? I don't even know. I don't even know. I don't think it was turning a profit. I've heard different versions that of course it was, of course it wasn't. I wasn't in at that level. I know that there was way too, I don't think it was a money issue with the $1 Million Baby Club, that I think it was so inconsistent because everybody started getting creative control. And they're taking control. You write television all day and the wrestlers change it on the spot. So I think that really started it was unfixable. I believe that was a big part of it, but that's just my opinion. So I don't know.
What was your reaction when Vince McMahon bought out WCW and ECW in the same year? Were you hopeful, concerned, or did it matter to you because you still had Japan, Mexico? Yeah,
I didn't. Once I was out, I don't follow it. I didn't read the Wrestling Observer. I didn't follow it because why? Why invite that energy in? I was very fortunate to have Japan, and I rekindled fires in Mexico. I had access to all the indies that I wanted to be on, but I had a serious contract in Japan, so it was fine. It was fine, and then I was going to Puerto Rico and all that stuff, so it was okay. Yeah, I when I heard about it, it was like I never imagined something like that would happen, but then it was like, okay. Because it just had nothing to do with me.
talking about Wrestling Society X years.
Okay.
Take us back to it. It was, kind of short lived, but fans still talk about it to this day. What do you remember about it?
I mean, it was such a dream of Kevin Kleinrock's. He had this. He was just so creative, and we've been friends for years. He's actually like my business partner, semi-manager right now. And he has Masked Republic, so he's doing all this stuff. He's responsible for my comic book series. And he asked me, please help me. Be my guy, commentary, agent, everything. All these guys, the talent was insane, but the concept of the structured violence, the electric fences, because we were all fans of FMW, that shit was awesome. The exploding this, the exploding that, the piranha tank, all those things. I mean, that was like a horror movie, man. And we loved the fuck out of that. We did the exploding coffin, all that kind of stuff. It was great. It was so ahead of its time. I don't, I get in trouble. I used to more than now. Now I really don't care. But at the time, it was like, if there was no WCX, there would be no Lucha Underground. I'm sorry. But I think it was a big mistake that didn't get a push. Yeah, for sure.
Talk about your matches with X-Pac or Six-Pac back then. Talk about tombstoning him into an exploding coffin. He
called that. We had met and we had become friends, and we're good friends now. I don't have his number here. I would call him. I love him. I really do. And we didn't really interact a lot together in the business. We became friends kind of outside of the business. And I respect him so much. And he's a great guy. To me, we've been friends. There's never been a rocky moment in our friendship. When we got to work together, he was like, I want you to beat the fuck out of me. Let's fight. And I was so nervous, because of who he is, because when I had started wrestling, he was already in Japan as a Lightning Kid, right? 1, 2, 3 kid. And, he was doing all the martial arts kicks and the dives and stuff like that. And then when I found out I was going to wrestle him, I kind of got, marked out, because I tried to copy him. He was an influence. So it was cool. And he called almost 90% of it. All of it was him.
Any memories of working around Teddy Hart?
It's Teddy's fault that I have to smoke this thing. He caused me so much PTSD. The way you see fucking Teddy Hart wrestle, I mean, sometimes we'd be in a restaurant or in a bar, and Teddy would he'd have his shirt off. He'd have that big Run DMC chain on and his Elvis glasses and in pajamas, and he'd fucking moonsault off the roof. And just because I think that Teddy is at his prime, was one of the best in the world, hands down. There wasn't anybody doing what he could do. The only thing that is sad about that is there were so many people around him that didn't point out he needs help. He's got mental health issues, and it's not a joke. And it just got to the point where he lost control. And I think him losing control was a good thing for him, so that he can get a way to turn the noise off for a bit.
What was it like locking up with some former ECW talents, like, say, New Jack?
Freaking New Jack. Me and New Jack were fun. We got along all the time. And we used to joke around. I'd be, hey, brother, I'm fucking sorry for slavery, man. Just don't fucking take it out on me. And he would look at me and say, what the did you just say? It was like, and he would just start laughing, and we would laugh, and then I was, white boy this, white boy that, the whole fucking night. But the ice was broken, and we became friends, and we went to Puerto Rico together a few times. We worked in LA, worked in field. We worked at a lot of places together, and we were really cool, man. And you know, we used to eat together. You know, wrestlers really don't hang out with each other, but we would make a point of in Puerto Rico pretty much every day. And you know, when he started to drink a little bit too much, I was like, bro, do you want me to help you out with this? And he was like, you know, no one's ever said that to me before. So we kind of bonded in a distinct way. But God fucking forbid you were on his bad side, boy. Oh my God. I was there for almost all that shit that you see on those highlight reels. I watched it and was like, this is something, there's something else here.
Let's talk about Lucha Underground for a bit.
Sure.
Tell us about all the hats you wore there. Wrestler, commentator, director.
I was very fortunate enough to be taught agenting from another perspective and correctly. So that was a blessing. The commentator in Spanish and English, I had no clue what the fuck was going on. I mean, I kind of had an idea, but I've never done it before. So Matt Stryker is one of my closer friends, but if it wasn't for Matt, my success as a commentator on Lucha Underground was because of Matt. The way he guided me, the way he taught me, the way we bounced off each other, you know, it was perfect. So I did that. And then, you know, I was invited to assist in the creative process. You know, once something was missing a little bit of this and that, and they were like, Vamp, how about, and what do you think? So I got to start to learn how to work on that side of things. Eric Van Wagenen, who was the executive producer, we had met at the Grammys when he was working, I think it was for MTV, and I was the bodyguard for Milli Vanilli. And we were there the night that Milli Vanilli was so drugged out of their minds that they messed up the choreography and the voices. And Eric and I were side by side. And when we started working on Lucha Underground, it was the weirdest thing. So because of that, I was very fortunate enough to be invited to the editing meetings. That is a lot of talent think that the talent doesn't understand that the commentator is the one who makes you who you are, and the camera person, but the editor who tells the story, without that, you're never making it in this business. And I got to learn all that. So my hats were many, and they were awesome.
You wrestled and mentored Pentagon Jr. Kind of follow up with what you feel about, or how you feel about him blowing up in WWE right now. What's it like?
We all knew. It was just a matter of time. You know, they were going to fire him because he wasn't catching on to the American mentality. You know, he was doing things like Mexicans, sometimes they do a big dive and then they get right up and they bow and they ask for applause. And it's kind of like, well, if you're in a street fight, is that what you're going to do? So he got caught up in that stuff and he didn't understand how to erase that here. And he was always interacting with the people, desperately trying to win his spot because his work was fabulous. But I told him, I said, brother, don't respond to the crowd for the whole match. Don't, when they call your name and they're telling you, go f yourself or they love you, don't even acknowledge them. You're going to drive them crazy. At the very end, when it's that moment, you fire up and you just turn. Just give them that little glance. They're going to go bananas. So once that started to happen, less is more, he started to get it. And nobody wanted to work with him because they weren't confident that he could get it. And they were going to fire him because they couldn't find a storyline. And that's when we came up with the master. He didn't know until the day of the match that it was me. But that experience was probably the crowning jewel in my artistic life, for sure.
Okay, so another former WWE star, now in AEW, Prince Puma, also known as Ricochet.
Yeah.
You were with him in the early days.
Yeah.
What was that like working with him?
It's spectacular. I mean, there are some guys like, what are you supposed to say? Because you got to remember, at that time, the things he was doing, that was the first time anybody had seen that. I mean, he spent so much time in Japan, so that made me a fan of his. Not all the, and then when you see it live, it is you see it the first time you see it, you can't digest it because it's so unreal. So you need to see it 2 or 3 times to really appreciate it, because he is so awesome. But when you do that kind of stuff and you're on TV every week and you do it every week, it's obvious. Sorry, this is biting my balls. It's obvious that it's a show. You're repeating the exact same things, and as impressive as it is, it doesn't excite people because it's not realistic. Pro wrestling works because there's something in the character that you, the fan, can relate to. You come there to scream and get your stress out and all that kind of stuff. So you find a wrestler that's kind of like you, and you live that through them. That's how pro wrestling kind of works. But, you know, when you see that every single week, it's phenomenal, but it doesn't get the same reaction after a while. That's kind of what happened there.
All right. What do you think the biggest reason for Lucha Underground ending was?
Well, I know the exact reason, but for legal reasons, I can't say anything.
All right. What happened to the talent contracts that made so many headlines at the time?
I know exactly what happened, but for legal reasons, I'm not allowed to say anything. I know exactly what happened, and it was a fucking nightmare. No, go ahead. Well, Antonio Pena, the founder of AAA, was the person I told you about that was talking to me in the parking lot. He made me. He discovered me, and he gave me my name. It was weird because I'll try to make this one as short as possible because it's complicated. I explained where my first dressing rooms were in Canada, you know, with Bruiser Brody, Ric Flair, Abdullah the Butcher, Stan Hansen, Rick Martel, Dino Bravo, the Road Warriors. That was, and the Samoans, that was a house show dressing room. And that's who taught me. So when I got to Mexico, I was like really disciplined, and there's a lot of ethics here, you know? And a lot of Mexican guys had been to Japan, and at that time, Japan was like very disciplined. So they taught the younger generation in the dressing room. When AAA started, all these new young talents that were just so rebellious, that didn't have that discipline, and there were no role models. So it was really Wild West. So the culture kind of got lost in transition there for a minute. So when I started to see that it was very difficult for me to adapt.
Did anyone ever seek out, per se, that knowledge that you had, you know, working alongside Ric Flair, Abby, Brody, all those guys? Did any of the younger guys that you ended up working out with in AAA kind of maybe seek out that advice from you because they knew you were connected so well?
No, because their ego was, so yes, a few. Pentagon, for sure. Pentagon, 100%. Mecha Wolf always listens to my advice. Ricky Banderas, Macias, Mil Muertes, we exchange this kind of knowledge. So there's a connection there. But the culture wouldn't be absorbed. They weren't going to understand what I was saying. It wasn't a language thing. It was a culture thing. But when I do seminars here, I don't, like this morning I did a seminar. I don't go in the ring. I don't do anything in the ring. It's all spoken word, a lot about psychology, a lot about answering their questions. So I explain the importance, why horror and horror movies work. Friday the 13th doesn't scare you. You want to see you want to see how's he going to kill the next victim. and you fucking love it. But Jaws, you don't even see the shark until 3/4 of the way through the movie. You see the dock getting pushed back. You see the darkness, the water. You see the girl go under. You know that motherfucker is in there. You know he's in there. You fucking just know it. That could happen to you. That's why that works as fear. So when I give seminars, I use all these things and I explain that. That's exactly how I explain it, because that's Abdullah the Butcher. You know he's got a fucking fork. Don't lock up with him. Don't drop kick him and fall down. You know he's got a fucking fork, and that's Jaws. So I try to explain that stuff. So I love it. I really do.
All right. What is your current role for AAA now?
I've been out of AAA since December, and AAA doesn't exist anymore. You know, they've been bought by the WWE. There is no more AAA. Yeah.
That was going to be my next question. Talk about WWE buying AAA. When did you first hear about it, and how do you think it's gone so far?
I heard the next day on the news. I think, like no one will even tell me. You know, and being that I've been in this thing for 44 years, and I speak both languages, and I know the Mexican culture a lot better than most. They didn't even invite me to the project, and that's the politicking again, and it's cool. You know what I'm saying? So that's kind of how the vibe it was in the beginning. But how do I think it's going? I watched, what was that, Worlds Collide? Is that what they called the show? And El Hijo de Vikingo did a dive, some kind of fucking thing. And he did this dive that was like, you gotta be fucking kidding me. He stands up and he bows to the public. It's like, you got to remember the American psychology of violence is somebody's going to get into a fight and try to win. It's not Cirque du Soleil. There's nothing wrong with it, but you're not trying to win the match. You got to remember it's professional wrestling. So if the Mexican wrestlers don't understand, pin the fucking guy. 1-2 kick out. I don't, because the Americans are going to start to laugh at it. The biggest stars out of this whole thing are going to be Mr. Iguana and Nino Hamburguesa. They're gonna dominate because the people know that they know their role is comedy. And it's understood. The other guys, the Superman, when you see 6 or 7 Canadian destroyers in a row, would you do that in a bar fight? Would you do that against 10 Hell's Angels? You know what I'm saying? It's like, come on, man. So I'm you know, maybe I'm a little bit older. Who knows? Maybe I smoke too much weed. Or maybe I smoke too little.
Talk about breaking your back in 2009 after jumping out the window during a home invasion.
Oh my God. I'm joking because of you. How the f*** did you know about that? I'm in the Guardian Angels, and the Guardian Angels are a volunteer group from New York City who are like a kind of paramilitary, police auxiliary kind of thing, patrolling the neighborhoods, doing, helping the police, a lot of fighting, street stuff. So the Guardian Angels are like a real, since the 1970s, a big thing in the streets of New York City. And I'm a big fan of that whole thing. So when I became a Guardian Angel, the idea was to use my Vampiro image to use that as publicity to pull people into the Guardian Angels Mexico program. Because it, get kids off the street out of gangs, give them opportunities for sports, music, that kind of thing. More so than patrolling. You can't patrol down there because the fucking narcos will take care of that in an instant. So when I was and I'm a Krav Maga instructor, there's Israeli martial arts, but I got to the police and military level. So I was giving seminars discreetly to police departments in Mexico. And in Guadalajara, they put me with the internal affairs department because those guys fought life in Mexico. Crooked cops, it's life or death. It's insane. And one night there was an operation, and I didn't know that. I just want to teach you martial arts and get paid. I had to go to assist and look at the level of combat the police officers had in real life scenarios. And we set up crooked cops. We gave marked bills. And once it went down and we swooped in, it's not too hard to identify me. And it got serious, very serious. So one night where I was living, I had a two-story house, and I heard shuffling and someone trying to open my bedroom door. I had a heart attack. I jumped up and we started talking, and I heard like 4 or 5 guys, and they were saying, "It's the police. We'll check. Somebody broke into your house." Like, bullshit. I got cameras in my bedroom, and they were like, "Open the fucking door." I said, "I'm not opening the fucking door," and I heard like 6 or 7 guns, and I was like, "I'm dead." So I jumped out the window. And when I jumped out the window, it was 2 stories, and I landed feet first. And the impact of that hit is when my broke my spine. And right after my spine was broken, the police punched me in the face with brass knuckles and the end of a gun. So my body went one way with the back injury, and my neck went the other way. So that was what caused the damage in my neck. To this day, it's pretty bad. Can't fix it. And my back, that's how I broke my back. It was at the end of the story when they were putting me down and they had to put the gun to my face. They said in Spanish, "Alto, alto es el jefe. Stop, stop, it's the boss." And they took their things off, and they were like, "Perdón, jefe, soy boss. These are orders." So because of what I did with the undercover cops and the internal affairs, the message was to take me out. So that's how that went down.
Wow. What?
And I kind of stopped. It's hard to work with the police down there, but that was pretty intense, bro.
How do you recover after something like that?
Oh no. I don't think you ever recover. PTSD is horrid. I used to, that helped fueled an addiction and depression and fear and insecurity and all these things. And then you start taking pills and all that. Not because it's treatment, because you want to block that out. I really got it, like I said, ritual magic, meditation, and just psychology and different things, and studies of history, and finding something that really motivated my brain to work different, afforded me to learn the tools to deal with that past trauma. And, the use of microdosing psychedelics when I meditate and stuff like that, going into a healing process, the use of marijuana as a calming tool to help me focus, to work through things. That's the only way. But it was traumatic, bro. And there's a million more like that.
Memories of matches against the great Sabu. We just recently lost him.
Yeah.
Talk about him inside and outside the ring. What was it like being?
We were friends outside the ring. We had conversations in the dressing room. We got along. We weren't the best of friends because, got to remember Sabu had issues, and it was hard for him to be stable around people. And his addiction was brutal. So when he was gone, he was gone. In the ring, it was fun because he would call stuff. He'd be like, "Punch me in the face." I'm like, "Dude, what the fuck are you talking about?" He says, "Punch me in the fucking face." And I was like, I can't punch you. He says, I'm gonna stab you. So what are you supposed to do? Seeing him and knowing his injuries and stuff like that, but he never complained. Never complained. Just being around that is awe-inspiring. Good or bad or ugly, there's not a lot of energies like him out there.
You're closing in on 4 decades of being the iconic Vampiro. What motivates you to keep going?
I like Vampiro. I hated it for so long. But where I transitioned to, I have a podcast on Bloody Disgusting on Bloody FM. I have 3 nights a week. And then I have another one in Spanish on a really big platform in the United States called Pitaya. And I'm creating a lot of online content about paranormal activity and and I'm working in horror movies and investigations and in paranormal. That and that's an extension as Vampiro, because I do it as Vampiro, because Vampiro practices all this stuff and studies it, and I live it. So that it is so much fun. It is awesome. And I never got to be an indie wrestler in the United States. I never got to do the Comic Cons and all that kind of stuff. So I'm like a fan, and I'm enjoying it. And I get to, every time I go to a new place, where's the punk band? Who's the rebel in town? What's the urban legend? And it's like, oh my God. So I have so much material for my podcast, and that I'm in the best place I've ever been, bro.
What do you think's the biggest change for you personally, wrestling today versus when you first started?
I think I was kamikaze suicidal in the beginning. One of in the innovator or innovation stage of hardcore and all those crazy things, so that it was trial and error. Like I was extremely aggressive, as we all are at that age, but aggressive to the point like we're gonna have a hard match, and it's okay. So the shots were real, so you gave and took. That now, it's like everybody knows I'm limited, and I can only do certain things, but what I do is enough to give that memory, right? So I'm now it's I see it that guys are willing to take care of you and understand the message. Back then I didn't see that. So in my personal case or whatever, that's the differences I see. There's more, but that's kind of what I see.
All right. What is the best advice you can give anyone looking to pursue this as a career?
Ask yourself why, and understand that it is not a reality that's going to be your career. Have a career and have an alternate stream of income first, then do this. Because the chances of you making it to sustain your family over 2-3 decades, raise your kids, put them through school, take care of your wife and your home and all that, it's not slim to none, but it's slim to none. It's even worse now. To be able to even get an opportunity to be in this new universe of what's going on with the WWE, it's so Illuminati like. If you are not connected beyond connecting, it's going to be very difficult for you to get in at that level. So you got to be realistic about your chances, because if you're starting out in life, you cannot depend on this. Do the other stuff, and the new system is learn how to do it where it all fits in a way that it doesn't stress you out. Because the times are changing, my friend. You're not going to make a living doing this. You're not right now.
What's next for Vampiro in 2025?
There's so much going on, man. One of my biggest, my podcast in the United States started in English. After doing 25 years of radio and podcasting in Spanish. I just started in English, and it's so much fun. I'm starting to do the video part of stuff. We're creating content, and I got a new project that is I'm going on tour for the next 3 years in a camper van, and I'm going to be going all over the United States, looking at indie promotions, looking for local urban legends, doing paranormal investigations wherever I go out of this van, and not just come in and do 10 minutes of filming, staying there for a week and living with the people and putting that out there. And just showing people how cool indie wrestling, what doors was open, right? So that starts Monday. I'm fucking excited beyond belief about it, man.
All right. My last question.
My penis is small.
Well, there we go. All right. Did you see when...
Oh, what?
Did you see when Vampiro first began wrestling? Did you see yourself where you're at now today?
I saw that when I was like 8 or 9 years old, when I saw the Rolling Stones on TV. There's a video of the Rolling Stones singing a Chuck Berry song, and it's in the 60s. And the girls are screaming so loud that the band can't hear the instruments. I was like, I was born, I understood that language. And I was like, I wanted, something's going to happen to me like that. So when Vampiro became a wrestler, it wasn't, I was a big fan of the Ramones. The Ramones are 1, 2, 3, 4, the song, and it's fucking done. And the Road Warriors, their entrance in AWA, it was in the ring, bing, 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 clothesline press, slam, choke slam, all that shit that they do off the top ropes. It was over. That's a punk rock song. So I was afforded the opportunity to be a rock star in the wrestling world. Didn't care about the matches. I didn't want to be a good wrestler. I wanted to be an explosive song. And I got to do that. So I don't know, man. I have a pretty extraordinary story.
I just thought of this bonus question. This will be the last one. If you could compare your career to, say, a rock band or punk band from back in the day, who would you say your career kind of mirrors? Or is there a band?
Yes. There's a great mix of, okay, there's the four main ones. The Sex Pistols, because of the fashion, you know, the rebellion and the political stance and the poor and that, you know, those words, you know, anti-hippie and all that kind of stuff. You know, when you're an abandoned youth and you have something that's so visually impactful that you're shook. So that was one thing. The other band would be the Ramones, because I don't like myself, and the Ramones just hated each other, but they were the greatest band ever. And then the Clash, just because of the political stance and the seriousness of supporting local art, local bands, helping the working man. That is a big one. The last one would be the Stray Cats, because when the Stray Cats played their first television appearance in the United States on the television show called Fridays, I was trying to figure things out in my life. And when I saw that, and these rockabilly guys came out with the sleeves cut off and the tattoos and their pants tucked into their boots and the motorcycle boots and motorcycle jackets and playing 50s rockabilly. And I'm a rockabilly kid. My dad brought me up in that. I was like, I don't know what my life is going to be like, but I just found out who I am. And that was it. That was the beginning of the end.
TitleMatchNetwork.com